Imagine you are a baker.
Okay, a baker.
Right. You have absolutely zero combat training, like a maximum of maybe 2 hit points to your name.
Extremely fragile.
Yeah, exactly. And your only weapon is, I don't know, a heavy wooden rolling pin.
Right, right.
But suddenly, you are knee-deep in freezing swamp water, and the mud is just sucking at your boots. And a 300-pound mutated toad just uncoiled a 15-foot sticky tongue and swallowed your neighbor.
Oh, wow. Which neighbor?
The local blacksmith just swallowed him completely whole. And you have no spells, right? You have no grand heroic destiny. So what do you do?
I mean, you scramble into the muck, you pray to whatever gods are listening, and you basically just try to survive the next 10 seconds.
Exactly.
Because that is the raw, unfiltered reality of the ecosystem we're dissecting today.
It really is. So welcome back to the 7th installment of the Into the Megadungeon channel. We're thrilled to have you joining us.
Yes, welcome back, everyone.
Last time we were together, we explored the absolute horrors and bizarre wonders of the 4th issue of the Carcass Crawler zine for Old School Essentials.
Yeah, we look at those strange classes, the unique equipment.
Right, and just the whole philosophy of expanding your game beyond the core rules. But today, our deep dive is fully focused on the 5th issue of Carcass Crawler.
Issue number 5.
Yeah.
And honestly, consider this installment your ultimate secret weapon.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you are a new referee looking for ways to challenge your table, or even a veteran wanting to inject some fresh, terrifying, and just highly memorable chaos into your campaigns, this is your blueprint.
Yeah, because the vibe of this 5th issue, it really stands apart from typical supplements, doesn't it?
It does. It isn't just a dry collection of, supplementary rules or isolated random tables. It functions as this cohesive thematic journey into literal murky waters.
Very murky. And mutated.
Right. It deals heavily with bizarre biological mutations, environmental hazards, and just the sheer, unadulterated desperation of low-level survival.
Yeah, and the core question it asks the referee to present to the players is like, what happens when you take the most fragile, everyday people imaginable and force them to navigate a meat grinder of an ecosystem?
An ecosystem that actively wants to digest them, I should add.
Exactly. So whether you are frantically prepping for your next weekend session and need something completely off the wall, or you just genuinely love analyzing the underlying philosophy of old school game design, there's a masterclass waiting here.
There really is. We were taking fragile characters and throwing them into the deep end.
Literally. So before we can even look at heroic character classes, knights in shining armor or wizards with ancient secrets, we have to look at how heroes are actually forged in this specific system.
Right, because in issue 5, they are forged by starting as absolute, undeniable nobodies.
Nobodies. We are talking about the level 0 character rules.
Yes, the funnel. The funnel adventure concept is just central to this. And while the idea was popularized by other old-school systems, primarily Dungeon Crawl Classics, it slots into old-school essentials with brutal perfection.
Brutal is the right word, because you aren't rolling up a paladin.
No, you are generating a mob of villagers. And the mechanics strictly enforce this narrative fragility. When you generate your attributes, strength, dexterity, constitution, all of that, you roll 3 6-sided dice, strictly down the line.
Wait, down the line. So no swapping stats around to optimize a specific build?
None at all. No swapping, no rolling 4 dice and dropping the lowest to ensure confidence.
Oh, wow. So if you roll a terrible strength score,
then you're playing a profoundly weak villager who probably struggles to lift a heavy bag of grain.
And if you roll a dismal charisma,
then you're playing someone who is just universally disliked by their peers. You keep whatever terrible, mediocre, or surprisingly decent stats the dice hand you.
that's harsh, but the fragility extends immediately to your life force too, right?
Oh yeah. For hit points, you start with a maximum of a 4-sided die.
Just a D4. So like a single bad encounter with a mundane animal could be the end?
Exactly. A stray dog, a large rat, or even just a treacherous fall into a ditch can end your life instantly. You are a completely normal human facing abnormal threats.
And what I love is the background tables they provide to flesh out these nobodies, because they ground you immediately in the dirt of the world.
Right, your previous profession.
Yeah, what you did for a living before this horrific adventure started dictates the incredibly meager gear you carry.
Like if you roll up a butcher, you don't get a shining broadsword and a wooden shield.
No, you walk into the dungeon clutching some dried meat and a couple of carving daggers.
And if you're a blacksmith, you get an apron, a pair of tongs, and a hammer.
A barber surgeon gets a razor and a bottle of strong spirits. It just forces the player to look at a pair of tongs and think, how do I use this to survive a goblin ambush?
And remember, the player is managing a small crowd of these people.
Right, you get multiple.
Exactly. Instead of each player controlling one hyper-competent character, you might be managing 4 or 5 terrified level 0 peasants simultaneously.
That is wild.
And the adventure they are thrown into is designed to be a lethal gauntlet. The psychological shift for the player is profound because you stop looking at your character sheet for answers.
Because there's nothing on the sheet to help you.
Right. You start looking at the environment. You start thinking about how to use that bottle of strong spirits and a ragged shirt to make a makeshift explosive, because running up and swinging your barber's razor is guaranteed suicide.
Okay, but look, I have to stop and look at this from the perspective of a modern player.
Sure.
Because I know players who spend hours, sometimes days, writing these elaborate 10-page backstories about their character's tragic lineage, right?
Oh, totally. They're deeply held personal motivations.
Yeah, and their intricate relationships, all before a single die is ever rolled at the table. If a referee drops this funnel concept on them, doesn't it just feel like a massive slap in the face?
I mean, I could see how it would.
It sounds like a reality TV elimination show, but with bloody stakes. You're just marching pigs to the slaughter. Why would anyone invest emotionally in a character that is statistically designed to die in the first 20 minutes?
Well, and that initial friction is incredibly common when you introduce modern players to old-school design. But the brilliance of the funnel is that the backstory is generated through the trauma of the gameplay itself, rather than being authored in a vacuum beforehand.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you don't write a 10-page document claiming your character is brave. You discover their bravery organically when your randomly generated baker, armed with nothing but a rolling pin and a bag of flour, somehow manages to get the killing blow on a mutated river monster.
Wow. While, like, 3 of their neighbors are dragged underwater screaming.
Exactly. When that baker survives the funnel, crawls out of the dungeon covered in muck, and earns enough experience to officially become a level 1 fighter, that character has a history that was actually experienced by everyone at the table.
That is so true. It's vastly more organic.
The survivors have earned their right to adventure, and the player is infinitely more attached to them because they beat the staggering odds to survive.
The gameplay is the backstory. The shared trauma is the glue. I completely get that. I can see how a player would be intensely protective of that baker going forward.
Oh, they will guard that baker with their life.
So let's fast forward a bit. A handful of these battered villagers actually survive the funnel. They hit level 1. What can they become?
Well, Issue 5 introduces 2 highly evocative new demi-human classes or races, depending on your game's structural rules that you can bring into the roster.
Right, the Ratlings and the Changelings. Let's start with the Ratlings, because they fundamentally alter how a party navigates a dungeon, don't they?
They absolutely do. So physically, Ratlings are bipedal, fur-covered humanoids with distinct rat-like features, large ears, and highly sensitive noses.
Okay, pretty standard rat people so far.
But mechanically, they introduce environmental wrinkles that a referee must actively plan for. First, they possess a 3-foot-long prehensile tail.
Yes. It's like having a built-in grappling hook that is incredibly strong, but lacks the software to do anything delicate.
That's a perfect way to put it. The rules are very specific about its limitations. The tail can hold a modest amount of weight. Think holding aloft a lantern, carrying a small sack of coins, or holding a light item.
But it lacks fine motor control.
Right. A player cannot use it to pick a complex lock. They cannot wield a secondary weapon with it to gain an extra attack.
That makes sense. That would be totally overpowered.
And crucially, if they are using the tail to hold something, they lose the precise balance required to climb sheer surfaces. It's a utility tool, designed for exploration, not a combat exploit.
Which means the player has to make tactical choices, like, do I use my tail to hold the torch so I can use my sword and shield, but sacrifice my ability to quickly scramble up the wall if things go bad?
Exactly. It's all about trade-offs.
I love mechanics that force a choice, but the sense of smell, I mean, that is where the Ratling completely breaks traditional dungeon design.
Oh, absolutely. Their olfactory senses are so acute, they're almost never caught off guard. Mechanically, they are only surprised on a roll of a 1 on a 6-sided die.
Think about the implications for your session prep as a referee.
It's massive.
Yeah.
If you have a Ratling in the party, relying on traditional ambushes hidden in the dark, simply fails.
Right, the ratling just smells the unwashed goblin ambush waiting behind the heavy oak door.
They smell the acidic tang of an ooze dripping from the ceiling long before it drops. It gives the player agency to interact with the unseen dungeon ecology.
That is so cool. And don't they also have a thing with giant rats?
Yes, they have an innate affinity with giant rats. They can speak to them and negotiate with them.
Oh, man.
And at higher levels, when human fighters are clearing land to build surface castles, a high-level ratling establishes a subterranean warren in the sewers of a major city.
Wait, really? Like a sewer kingdom?
Yeah, they attract a loyal following of giant rats to act as an intelligence network, spies, and messengers throughout the urban underbelly.
So a player essentially gets to become a subterranean mob boss.
Basically, yeah.
That is a completely different endgame fantasy than just sitting on a traditional throne. Now let's talk about the Changeling, because it takes that same idea of shifting player agency and pushes it entirely into the realm of deception.
Oh, the Changeling. We are looking at a magical demi-human with a shape-stealing mechanic that feels incredibly dangerous to use.
Yeah, a Changeling can alter their physical form to perfectly mimic another humanoid. But the limitation is where the dramatic tension lies.
Exactly. It requires a full, uninterrupted round of physical contact. A player cannot simply look at a guard captain from across a crowded tavern and perfectly copy their face.
Right, no wireless identity theft?
No, they have to touch them and maintain that contact while the transformation takes hold.
This completely upends how players approach a hostile room. Think about your own gaming group right now as you listen to this. Think about the most chaotic player at your table.
Every table has one.
Right. Now give them the ability to physically become the dungeon boss with a 10-second handshake.
It changes everything. You are running a standard dungeon crawl, the players kick in the door, weapons drawn. Instead of rolling for initiative, the Changeling player yells, "Wait! Don't kill the hobgoblin, Lieutenant. Pin him down."
I need to hold his hand for 10 seconds.
Exactly. Pin him down so I can become him, walk into the barracks next door, and order his troops to march out into the forest.
That is brilliant. And the rules deliberately specify that the Changeling can steal the form of a living, sleeping, unconscious, or even freshly slain victim, don't they?
They do. And stealing the form of a corpse opens up macabre infiltration tactics. You find a dead courier on the road, assume their form, take their sealed letters, and just walk right through the front gates of the enemy keep.
It turns standard combat encounters into high-stakes espionage thrillers.
It really does. And at higher levels, a Changeling establishes a secret hideout and attracts apprentices, essentially forming their own clandestine thieves guild.
So both the Ratling and the Changeling really force the referee to design situations with multiple avenues of resolution, because brute force is no longer the most interesting option on the table.
Precisely. You have to prep differently.
Okay, so you survive the funnel, you figure out your bizarre new biology, but you still need tools to survive the horrors waiting in the dark.
You definitely need tools.
Issue 5 breathes life into the everyday gear of an adventurer, starting with the Apprentice's Toolkit. We really need to look at cantrips because they address a very specific pain point for anyone who has ever played a low-level magic user in an old-school game.
Oh, it is a huge pain point. In traditional OSR games where the philosophy is heavily skewed toward high lethality and strict resource management, a level 1 magic user is notoriously painfully fragile.
Extremely fragile.
They often have exactly one spell memorized for the entire day.
Yep, just one.
Once that player casts Sleep or Charm Person in the first 10 minutes of a 4-hour session, their magical utility is entirely spent.
Right, and then for the rest of the night, they're essentially just a vulnerable academic in a robe, throwing darts very poorly from the back line.
Throwing darts and hoping they don't get hit by a stray arrow.
It is incredibly demoralizing for a player who sat down wanting to feel like a master of the arcane arts. You get one moment of glory, and then you're just a liability.
Well, Issue 5 introduces cantrips as minor arcane exercises to mitigate this, and it does so without breaking the game's economy.
Right, these aren't powerful spells.
No, these are the trivial spells apprentices practice endlessly before they are trusted with real, dangerous magic. They do not deal damage.
Okay.
They do not magically solve complex encounters or bypass locked doors, but they provide immense narrative utility and flavor.
Like what? Give us an example.
Well, one cantrip allows the caster to blow elaborate, brightly colored smoke rings.
Okay, that's fine.
Another is a minor sense magic ability that is highly unreliable, requires intense, uninterrupted concentration, and might just give you a headache instead of an actual answer.
I love that. It gives the wizards something to actively do during exploration.
Yeah.
I can easily picture a scenario where a party is split up in a massive echoing cavern, right? Where shouting would attract a horde of
Oh,
monsters.
absolutely.
The magic user puffs on a pipe and sends a glowing blue smoke ring drifting silently up toward the ceiling to signal their location to the rogue.
That's a perfect use case. It rewards creative thinking and makes the character feel magical without giving them, an infinite laser beam that breaks the combat math.
Right, because the math is sacred. Speaking of the math, the issue details mundane weapons and armor crafted from special materials, too. Adamantine, mithril, and silver.
Yes. And the astronomical economic cost of these materials is the crucial factor here.
They are not cheap.
No, an adamantine sword or a suit of mithril chainmail costs a staggering amount of gold. In many old-school systems, gold acquired from a dungeon translates directly into experience points.
Right, gold equals XP.
So giving players highly desirable, non-magical gear to spend their hard-won treasure on solves a late-game economic problem where players simply have too much money and nothing to buy.
It creates a massive aspirational goal. Like, if you are tracking rumors that a werewolf is terrorizing the local farmlands, suddenly that outrageously expensive silver dagger isn't just a shiny status symbol you show off in the tavern.
Exactly.
It is a vital, non-negotiable survival tool. You will empty your bank account for it.
You'll sell everything you have.
But let's say you bypass the blacksmith entirely. You defeat a dungeon boss, you open the chest, and you find a magic sword.
Always a good moment.
Usually, the referee rolls on a generic loot table, sighs, and says, "You found a +1 sword." The player writes +1 on their character sheet, the math gets slightly easier, and everyone just moves on.
It is incredibly static.
Yeah.
It reduces a mythical artifact to a spreadsheet adjustment. But Issue 5 vehemently rejects boring magic swords. It provides a robust system for generating quirks, physical traits, unique histories, and minor magical side effects that give every single blade an identity.
Because a sword should be a puzzle, right, or a multi-tool, or even a severe liability, depending on the situation.
Exactly. And the gravity blade is the perfect illustration of this design philosophy.
Oh, the gravity blade is so good. Let's talk about that.
It is a magic sword. Yes, it helps you hit things better, but its defining feature is a localized magnetic or gravitational pull. It constantly pulls small, unattended objects toward it.
So just unsheathing the thing and fighting with it requires a high-strength score, right?
Yeah, because the weapon is constantly resisting your movements, dragging itself toward the nearest metal belt buckle or iron spike.
That mechanic turns every single room into a dynamic puzzle.
It does. If a player drops an essential iron key down a narrow grate, they can lower the sword and use the magnetic pull to fish it out. It provides real utility.
But in the heat of combat, think about the tension of a bad dice roll. Oh, it's terrible. You swing the gravity blade at an armored hobgoblin and roll a critical failure. The referee doesn't just say, "You miss, your turn is over."
No. The referee says, your sword magnetically snaps onto the heavy iron shield of the hobgoblin. The pull is so strong, it is ripped entirely from your grip.
The goblin is now wielding a shield that has your magic sword permanently affixed to the front of it. That is a cinematic, highly memorable moment.
Losing your weapon because of its own bizarre magical properties is a story the table will laugh about for years.
Totally. It reinforces the core philosophy we've been discussing. The world is deeply physical, the magic is weird and often wildly unpredictable, and the players must interact with their environment, not just stare at the numbers on their character sheet.
Exactly. And Issue 5 doesn't just put you in sterile, dry, 10 by 10 stone rooms either.
No, it puts you knee-deep in murky river water, where swinging a magnetic weapon might attract something far worse than a loose nail.
We have to talk about the murky ecology. The aquatic bestiary in this issue is absolute nightmare fuel.
It really is. I was reading through it and just, wow.
The focus is entirely on freshwater hazards. Lakes, rushing rivers, and stagnant ponds. It takes creatures that feel almost mundane and scales them up to terrifying, hyper-aggressive proportions.
Right, like the giant beavers.
Yes. These aren't just large rodents you hunt for pelts. They are aggressive environmental engineers. They build massive, treacherous dams that actively alter the flow of rivers on your campaign's hex map.
They actually changed the map.
They create sudden flooded hazard zones where previously there was dry land, and they're fiercely territorial, meaning a simple routine river crossing suddenly becomes a tactical nightmare against creatures defending their architecture.
That is so cool. Then you encounter the freshwater hag. She is described as this ghastly, warty crone who actively smears herself in foul river muck and weaves dead, rotting fish bones into her hair.
Very glamorous.
Oh, yeah. But her hideousness isn't just flavor text. Looking at her can physically weaken a character. And her most terrifying defense mechanism is her gaze.
Right. Her gaze can literally transform a player character into a toad.
A toad! Just boom, you're an amphibian. And if the players end up in the water, maybe capsized by one of those giant beavers, they face the grindylows.
Oh, the grindylows are nasty. These are tiny, slimy, aquatic gremlins that use the murky water as camouflage. They hide in the dense river weeds and use their webbed claws to silently grab onto the ankles of wading characters.
Or they work together to capsize small boats.
Right. They aren't trying to fight you in a fair duel. They are mischief makers, whose primary goal is to drag you below the surface and drown you.
But the mudslingers are where the environmental design really shines for me. These are amphibious fish that slither out of the water and onto the muddy banks.
They don't bite, do they?
No, they don't bite. They ambush prey by spitting a massive mucus-laden glob of mud that instantly paralyzes the target.
That's terrifying.
But their mechanical weakness is entirely tied to their biology. If their skin dries out, they lose the ability to breathe air and will immediately panic and flee toward the nearest body of water.
That is such a great mechanic.
Yeah.
Because the referee isn't just tracking hit points, they're tracking moisture.
Yes.
If a player realizes they're fighting a mudslinger, they don't just stand there trading blows with the sword. They grab a blazing torch and thrust it at the creature to aggressively dry out its skin, forcing it to retreat.
It turns combat into an environmental puzzle. You use fire not for damage, but for dehydration.
Exactly.
But then I am looking at the weretoads and the snallygasters, and I am genuinely horrified.
The weretoads are brutal.
The weretoads have a 15-foot sticky tongue. They shoot it out, drag you screaming into their massive maw, and if the dice go their way, they swallow you completely whole.
Oh.
You are trapped inside their belly, taking brutal acid damage every single round until your party manages to kill the toad from the outside.
And the snallygaster is just as bad. It's a flying reptilian horror with a beak bursting with blood-sucking tentacles that swoops down from the canopy, snatches you, and carries you off into the sky.
Blood-sucking tentacles.
Yeah.
On a beak.
Yep. The consistency of the threat is what makes this bestiary so effective, though. These creatures are highly specialized ambush predators.
Right. They utilize the murky water, the thick mud, and the obscured sky.
They rely heavily on natural camouflage. They actively try to drag the players into elements where humanity is weak and the predator is supreme.
That makes total sense.
A referee utilizes this bestiary to teach the players a vital, enduring lesson. You must fear the environment, because the environment is the weapon.
Look, I completely agree with the philosophy, but I'm staring at these stat blocks, the mudslinger's paralysis mud, the weretoad's swallow hole mechanic, the hag transforming you into a literal amphibian, and honestly, from a modern player's perspective, this seems completely unfair.
It sounds like it, yeah.
These are classic save or die or save or suck mechanics. You fail one single saving throw, one roll of a 20-sided die, and your character is instantly dead or permanently transformed or entirely removed from the fight while they dissolve in stomach acid. You spend all this time surviving the funnel, getting attached to your baker-turned-fighter, and then a toad eats you in round one. How is a referee supposed to run that without the whole table rage-quitting in frustration?
That is a vital question, and it cuts to the very heart of how you must run old-school games. The absolute golden rule is this. You never, ever surprise the players with a lethal mechanic out of nowhere.
Okay.
You must master the art of telegraphing danger. If the players are entering a weretoad swamp territory, they shouldn't just stumble upon the monster hiding in a bush.
Right.
They should first find the horrific remains of a previous victim, their armor half melted, and their bones pitted by highly acidic digestive juices.
Ah, so you leave breadcrumbs.
You leave glaring warning signs. As they push deeper into the swamp, before the weretoad even notices the party, the player should witness it hunting.
Okay, show, don't tell.
Exactly. They should see a large swamp bird snatched out of midair from 15 feet away by a massive, lightning-fast tongue. You show the players the mechanic in action.
So you give them the definitive information. This creature can swallow things whole from a great distance, and its stomach is full of acid.
Yes. Once the players possess that information, if they choose to charge in blindly with swords swinging and fail their saving throw, the resulting death is a direct consequence of their poor tactical choices, not an arbitrary, unfair punishment handed down by a cruel referee.
I see. It transforms the encounter from a game of character stats into a game of player skill.
Precisely. You are testing the player's ability to navigate and mitigate known danger, not just rolling dice against a monster's armor class.
If you know the tongue is 15 feet long, you figure out a way to attack from 20 feet away, or you set a trap.
Exactly.
So how do you synthesize all of this? How do you take the funnel rules, the weird sensory mechanics of the rattlings, the magnetic swords, and these terrifying aquatic ambush predators, and actually build a cohesive session out of it?
Well, issue 5 doesn't leave you guessing on that front either. It bakes the cake for you with a full adventure module called Up Chaos River.
Up Chaos River. I love the title.
It is a spectacular piece of module design because it serves as a practical, playable tutorial for literally everything we've discussed today.
Awesome.
It is specifically designed to be run either as a brutal level 0 funnel for a mob of villagers or a highly dangerous adventure for a regular party of first-level characters.
And the narrative premise is so delightfully petty, which is just a breath of fresh air compared to typical apocalyptic fantasy storylines.
Oh, the premise is great.
Right. There is a small, quiet town called Backwater. They recently held a joyous midsummer festival, but they forgot, or perhaps intentionally and rudely neglected, to invite Mother Greenteeth, the local freshwater hag.
Which is a huge mistake.
Massive mistake. Out of pure, unadulterated, petty revenge for this social slight, she kidnaps Slig, the benevolent local river spirit. She traps him and begins aggressively pumping this mutating, glowing pink substance called Chaos Ooze directly into the river upstream.
Just out of spite.
Pure spite. The water supply is poisoned, the neighboring upriver village has gone completely silent, and the players have to paddle upstream to stop her before the mutations reach their homes.
Structurally, it is a brilliant setup, particularly for a new referee who might be intimidated by running a sprawling open-world sandbox.
Right, because it's a river.
Exactly. It is, by definition, a linear adventure. The players are in canoes moving along a river. They can only progress upstream toward the hag or retreat downstream.
It entirely removes the paralysis of choice that can stall a game.
Yes. Yet within that strict, linear road trip framework, the module is absolutely packed with high-agency choices, strange encounters, and brutal resource management.
Because the journey itself is a grind, right? The players are crammed into fragile canoes or rickety rafts, and the module introduces specific mechanics to track physical exhaustion.
Which is so important for a travel module.
If the players decide they need to rush, trying to paddle for more than 12 hours a day in a desperate sprint to save the neighboring town, their characters start taking severe mechanical penalties to all their rolls.
The referee forces them to make a terrible choice. Do you exhaust yourselves to get there faster, or do you pull over and try to sleep on riverbanks that you know are crawling with were-toads and mudslingers?
Pick your poison. And the encounters they roll on the way up are wonderfully surreal.
Random encounter tables totally reject mundane filler. You don't just roll a die and fight like under D4 generic goblins on the shore.
No, you might encounter the Riverman.
Ah, the Riverman.
He is described as a bizarre, perpetually soaking wet bugbear. He is entirely non-hostile, but he speaks with literal river water pouring out of his mouth with every word.
Just constantly gushing water.
Yeah. If the players are brave enough to allow this terrifying, dripping creature to ride in their tiny canoe for a few hours, he will eventually hand them a pile of dripping wet gold coins as payment and simply dive backward off the boat, vanishing into the murky depths.
It challenges the player's instinct to attack everything that looks monstrous.
Totally. Or they might be paddling along and suddenly a merchant ship speeds past them, driven by a frantic, shouting salesman.
What's he selling?
He is desperately trying to sell them a bundle of magical silk armor that is as tough as hardened leather, but his boat isn't slowing down. The players have to scream negotiations across the rushing water and make a split-second economic decision before he vanishes around the river bend.
That is so chaotic and fun. But the absolute centerpiece of the river journey has to be the ghost ship.
The swirling ship caught in the eddy?
Yes. The players spot a silent, seemingly abandoned sloop spinning slowly in a whirlpool. If they board it and venture below the deck, they find a crew of waterlogged zombies.
But the zombies aren't attacking, right?
No, they are standing in a circle, staring in silent, unblinking reverence at a massive, solid gold statue of a giant beaver.
Of course it's a beaver.
Naturally. And this statue is worth an absolute fortune. Enough gold to level up the entire party instantly.
Okay, there has to be a catch.
A huge catch. If a player touches the statue or attempts to steal it, the magical buoyancy of the ship instantly fails. The sloop sinks like a stone, plunging straight to the bottom of the river, trapping everyone below deck in an enclosed space with a horde of drowning zombies.
Wow. It is the ultimate terrifying test of player greed. Do you risk a highly lethal, claustrophobic underwater encounter for a massive payout? Or do you look at the zombies, look at the gold, and decide to quietly back out of the room and leave well enough alone?
Exactly. It's a chaotic, aquatic amusement park ride. The track you're on is straight, but the animatronics are actively trying to digest you.
That's a great analogy. And the entire time you're making these decisions, the river water around you is running thick and pink with Mother Greenteeth's chaos ooze.
Right, the ooze.
If a player touches the water, or if a Greenie-Low manages to capsize their canoe, they have to make a saving throw against poison. If they fail, they suffer a random permanent physical mutation.
The mutation table is a fantastic narrative device. It visually tracks the trauma of the journey.
Give me some examples of these mutations.
Well, a character might pull themselves back into the boat and suddenly realize they have grown webbing between their fingers and toes.
Okay, kind of useful, actually.
Or they sprouted a functional but horrifying third arm from their ribs.
Less useful, more horrifying.
Their skeletal structure might degenerate into soft, shark cartilage, severely reducing their constitution score. They might straight up transform into a giant, clacking crab.
Just a crab.
Just a crab. It adds an escalating sense of body horror, dread, and utter weirdness to the travel mechanics.
So by the time the party finally reaches the hag's lair, they might look less like a group of human villagers and more like a traveling troupe of aquatic circus freaks.
Exactly. Which makes the final showdown so incredibly epic and strange.
Yeah, the climax of the adventure takes place inside a massive, flooded, giant beaver dam.
It's pitch dark, the tunnels are half underwater, the air is thick with rot, and the environment itself is structurally hostile.
And as they explore the dam, they find strange, glowing white mushrooms jutting out of the chewed wood shavings.
Which are a trap, right?
Sort of. If a wounded, desperate player decides to eat one of these mysterious mushrooms, it actually heals their hit points.
Well, that's good.
But they immediately have to save against a potent hallucinogenic poison. If they fail, they experience an intense waking nightmare where they believe their own flesh is hardening into bark and their legs are taking root.
Oh, wow.
They believe they are turning into a living tree, and they are completely paralyzed with sheer psychological terror for several minutes.
It forces the players to gamble with their own sanity just to regain health.
Yes. And finally, they reach the center of the dam for the confrontation with Mother Greenteeth herself. She is surrounded by her corrupted, oozing giant beaver minions. But the detail that perfectly encapsulates the chaotic tone of this entire issue is the weapon she wields. Magic spoon.
I cannot get over this weapon. It is brilliant.
It is a large wooden cooking spoon heavily etched with erratic, chaotic runes. When she swings this spoon and successfully hits a player character, the referee doesn't just roll for standard bludgeoning damage.
No, they rolled a die to determine a completely random magical effect.
She hits your fighter, and they might spontaneously combust, burning with magical fire for 2 full rounds.
Ouch.
She hits your rogue, and it might cast a powerful confusion spell, causing them to attack their own allies.
Even worse.
Or, in the most hilarious outcome possible, she hits your dying magic user, and the spoon erupts in a burst of twinkling, harmless glitter that actually restores their hit points, healing the person she was trying to bludgeon to death.
It is pure, unfiltered, unpredictable chaos. You cannot mathematically plan for a boss fight where the enemy's primary weapon has a statistical chance to accidentally heal your party's frontline fighter.
You really can't.
The players just have to ride the wave of absurdity, adapt to the shifting circumstances second by second, and pray that their ragged band of mutated, traumatized level 0 peasants survives long enough to claim the title of level 1 heroes.
Yeah. When you step back and look at this zine as a complete package, it reveals itself to be so much more than a collection of monsters or a quirky module.
It really is.
It is a comprehensive, masterfully designed toolkit for establishing a very specific, highly engaging tone at your table. It teaches the referee how to run a gritty, weird, low-level campaign where the players cannot rely on superheroic abilities.
No, they must rely entirely on their wits, their creativity with mundane tools, and a very healthy amount of paranoia to survive.
And it creates enduring memories. A player will inevitably forget the mechanical details of a standard, perfectly balanced fight against a generic bandit in a tavern.
They absolutely will.
But they will never, ever forget the Tuesday night their mutant shark-bone blacksmith had to wrestle a giant beaver underwater in the dark while desperately trying to avoid being struck by a hag wielding a magical exploding wooden spoon.
That is the kind of emergent storytelling that defines the old school experience.
It's a masterclass in making your fictional world feel dangerous, unpredictable, and fiercely terrifyingly alive. And I think that is the ultimate takeaway for anyone listening to this deep dive right now as you prepare for your next session. Your primary job as a referee isn't to provide a perfectly balanced, fair, mathematical combat simulator where the players are guaranteed to win if they just press the right buttons.
Not at all. Your job is to present a living, breathing ecosystem that genuinely does not care if the characters live or die. The ecosystem simply exists, and the players must figure out how to navigate it.
And Issue 5 gives you the exact tools you need to build that world.
It challenges the players to rise to the occasion, rather than lowering the difficulty to meet them.
So true. Before we wrap up this installment, though, I want to leave you with a philosophical question to mull over about the underlying world building implied by this adventure.
Oh, this is a good one.
Because there is something deeply unsettling lurking just underneath the quirky, chaotic humor of Up Chaos River. Think carefully about the initial premise of the module. Mother Greenteeth did not launch a highly calculated, politically motivated military campaign.
No, she didn't.
She wasn't summoned by a cabal of dark cultists trying to bring about the end of the world. She was just a local swamp hag who felt slighted. She got petty, jealous, and vindictive over missing a midsummer town festival.
A purely spiteful, localized emotional reaction.
Right. Pure spite. And out of nothing but that petty spite, she was able to single-handedly unleash what amounts to localized biological warfare.
It's terrifying when you put it like that.
She dumped enough chaos ooze into a major regional waterway to physically uproot an entire neighboring village, fundamentally alter the biology and DNA of the local wildlife, and permanently mutate any human being unfortunate enough to touch the water.
All over a missed party invitation.
Exactly. If a single solitary hag, acting completely alone over a minor social slight, holds the raw power to inflict apocalyptic, region-altering ecological devastation, what does that tell us about the fragile, terrifying balance of power between small pockets of human civilization and the wild, untamed magic of the wilderness in the old-school essential setting?
It suggests a world where humanity is not the dominant force. They are barely surviving, clinging to the absolute edge of a knife. And the weird, mutating wilderness is always waiting, just past the tree line, ready to reclaim them the moment they drop their guard.
A terrifying and beautiful thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed wading through the murky, mutant-infested waters with us today, be sure to stick around the Into the Megadungeon channel.
We have an endless labyrinth of lore, mechanics, and modules left to explore.
Keep your torches lit, don't trust the water, always check the ceiling, and we will see you in the next installment as we keep exploring the depths.